So last week we got a little technical and we talked about vulnerabilities. We talked about different CVEs, we talked about different CVSS scores, different ratings on different vulnerabilities and how to prioritize. This week we're going to talk about IRPs, Incident Response Planning. Stay tuned. Prepare, identify, contain, eradicate, recover, and review. It's simple. Those are the steps of an incident response plan. That's what we are going to break down and talk about today. Let's face it, from our previous episodes, we know that we have vulnerabilities out there. We know that no matter what we do, there's always going to be some type of malicious intent or malicious attacker breezing across our network at some point. So we need to be able to be prepared for this. As long as we are connected to the internet, we are vulnerable to a breach. So an incident response plan is basically a playbook of how we are going to get through this breach. The first step of an incident response plan is preparing. And I can tell you that this is the most important part of any phase in the incident response plan. It is being prepared. It is making sure that your employees receive the proper training, having policies and procedures define your employees' roles and responsibilities in the event of a breach. We also want to make sure that we are conducting tabletop exercises. What is a tabletop exercise? This is a simulated exercise that we walk through in the event of a breach. So we want to basically practice this tabletop exercise at minimal one time a year where we walk through this. You can even use your penetration test that you have done as a tabletop exercise. When a third party is conducting your penetration test, you may have certain alerts that go off when this penetration test is being performed. So we can use this as a simulated breach to walk through and see how we would react to this certain breach. So after this tabletop exercise, we actually need to evaluate how we did, right? So just like on the football field, when we're running a play and we make a great play or we don't do so good on a play, we go to the coach and we leverage our team and our resources to see how we could do better next time. That's what the tabletop exercises are all about. It is walking through this playbook, this process of a simulated breach to see how well we did, kind of grade ourselves, and then use our team to leverage them and see how we could do better next time. Another part, the not so fun part of the preparing phase of an incident response plan is talking about funding that might be needed. So we know that in the possible event of a breach, we might have to use a third party to help your organization out. So you want to save maybe 3 or 4 days waiting for approvals to come through for funding to have that third party come in because your company has been breached. We want to figure out who we might use, what type of funding we might need, and have that approved ahead of time because every second matters when a breach occurs. So if we know that we don't have the resources to solve this breach and we know that we're going to have to use a third party, let's already have connections with this third party laid out and possible funding so that we can use and leverage this third party when needed. So phase 2 of an incident response plan is identify. Typically, identify is broken down into 4 different categories, 4 different ways that it is identified that you had a breach. So the first one is possibly something internally within your organization. This could be coming from a firewall alert, could be coming from antivirus that flagged, system logs, something internally that informed one of your associates or staff that there was possibly a breach. The second one is that your bank calls and informs you that you may have a breach. And this might come from one of their customers calling the bank to say there seems to be some really suspicious activity on my credit card. Well, what happens is maybe multiple clients from that bank call and they seem to all be routing back to your organization. So that could be one identifying reason as well. The next one, the third one, is law enforcement. They could be conducting an investigation against a case of a stolen credit card and they realize that there were a lot of fraudulent charges or activity that came from your organization. So that could be the third reason. The fourth is that a customer complains to your organization that there seems to be some really weird activity going on with their card, but maybe not one customer, but maybe there's a trend of multiple customers calling in over a certain short period of time that might flag you that something just might not be right. These are not the only categories of identifying a breach within your organization. However, these seem to be the top ones. So now that our breach has been identified, we want to take it to the next step, which is contain. So hopefully for contain, you've already walked through your tabletop exercises many times, and your team and your resources are ready to contain this breach. We want to be able to isolate it and make sure that it doesn't spread any more than it already has. But there are some really important things that we need to make sure that we don't do. First of all, we don't want to panic. We don't want to make hasty decisions. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're not just quickly wiping and erasing and re-imaging hard drives, because if we do that, we are then eliminating any type of forensic data that we would need to make sure that this breach doesn't happen next time. When we wipe that data, we're basically taking all of that evidence and we're destroying it. So when a breach happens, we need to make sure that we learn from that breach, that we contain it, but we also save that evidence so that we can investigate that so that next time it doesn't happen. To give you an example, if we have a breach and we've noticed a breach on a certain system, the first thing that we want to do instead of wiping it is to isolate it and get it off of the network. We could just unplug the thing or turn the wireless off to make sure that it is not communicating to other devices. But if your breach has spread throughout the network, this is where we can use our VLANs, our switches, our firewalls to isolate and shut off certain portions of the network from that particular incident as well. There is no one containing measure that you can take for any organization that is a silver bullet. However, this is where these tabletop exercises and being able to understand your organization, the risks associated with it, and know how fast and how efficiently we are able to contain a certain type of breach. So now this leads us to the next portion of our incident response plan, which is Eradicate. So with Eradicate, we've had the breach, we've contained it. Now, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Did this happen because maybe there was a patch that was not applied, and this patch was probably out for maybe 90 to 120 days? Well, there has to be a reason why these patches haven't been applied. Typically, I like to take a look clear back to the policies and procedures. Are there proper systems hardening policies in place that say when a patch is released, it has to be applied within 10 days or 15 days or 30 days? We want to make sure that we get to the root of this problem. If we have multiple systems that are on different patching schedules or maybe not even on a schedule, we want to make sure that this is eradicated and taken care of. We want to get to the root of the problem. By going and fixing those certain patches and not going to the root of the problem and making sure that they are done in a streamlined and efficient manner all of the time, we're not really fixing the problem. So in this particular case, maybe going back and looking at those policies and procedures might fix the root of the problem, which might then help alleviate some of the pain down the road. We need to make sure that we take the time with the eradication phase, that we can confidently move to the next phase, which is recover. Recovering, of course, is simply just what it means. It's recovering. It's putting systems back online, getting things back into production, getting your business moving again. So all of those isolations that you did, the systems that you took off of the network, recovering is the process of putting all of those back on. However, if we have not taken our time in the eradication phase, we will keep just going in this loop. So we eradicate, but we don't do it quite right. We try to recover, we put systems online, they are reinfected, so then we go back to eradicate. So it is very important that we take time with the eradicate phase to make sure that we feel very confident in our solution to that breach, that we can now put those systems back online in the recovery phase. We definitely want to monitor systems extremely close after a breach as we are recovering. But again, we want to make sure we're confident. But at the same time, let's monitor these systems closely. Let's watch our IDSs. Let's watch our antivirus. Let's make sure that there's a culture of awareness within your organization so that if anything seems a little off, that they communicate and let you know. So now that we've done this proficiently, now we're going to move to the next phase, which is the review phase. It is never over once we get our systems back online in the recovery phase. We have to make sure that we do a review phase. The reason for this is typically I like to sit back and listen. I like to talk to everybody that was involved in the incident, in the breach, and in all of the other phases to make sure that I understand what everybody has seen. I want to gather their input. So typically I will sit back and I will listen to everybody and get all of their opinions, get all of their thoughts, and then try to make some sense of that. Then I typically go back to, let's talk about our tabletop exercises again. So we want to make sure in the review phase that we have learned. I call it lessons learned. We want to learn from what happened. We want to learn how we do better. Even if you win the Super Bowl, you want to make sure that next year your players are ready to do it again or even better. It is always a process of learning. Without a proper incident response plan within your organization, there is going to be panic. There is going to be more time wasted than is needed to be able to respond to your breach. So we want to make sure that your company has a proper incident response plan, and there's always room for improvement. And there's no silver bullet. Every incident response plan is different, but having one is definitely going to save you so much grief. If you have questions or concerns about developing your own incident response plan, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will see you next week where we are going to be talking about how a vCISO can be a great strategy for your organization.